Good evening, everybody. Tonight we're going to do something a little bit different on a lot of accounts. I've never painted a model like this before in ever, and there's a good reason for it.
This is a 6th edition Witch Elf from the Dark Elves faction of Warhammer Fantasy. For the uninitiated, they're basically the evil BDSM elves, and are renowned for showing a bit too much, well...
ass.
I've never been quite comfortable with this type of model, and I'm going to, instead of just speaking all about it myself, because it's really not my place to do any of this, I'm going to have a special guest come in and... What?
I want to watch you squirm.
As far as I know, these models came out somewhere around 4th edition in 1995. Am I wrong? I very much could be. Correct me in the comments if you feel like it. And their commercial data, when they originated, where they came from, it's much harder to access than their lore, so I'm not even going to try.
In retrospect, I really don't know why I would be uncomfortable painting this model. It's not even like it's the worst of its kind. I mean, yeah, it's a little exposed, but there are actual worse, more detailed, pornographic miniatures that have been produced by some third parties or another. I'm dead fucking serious.
But that is another story for another time, and one that I will definitely not enjoy telling. For right now, let's just dive into this miniature. So in addition to painting something from a faction I've never painted before, I'm going to be using a technique I've never used before. Painting from the inside out. It's not as gross as it sounds. It just means that I'll be dressing the miniature by painting the flesh tones first, and then doing the clothes and the armor afterwards, base coating everything as I see fit, after I've done the flesh tones. This will look a little awkward at first because the model will in fact look a little bit naked, and you're just going to have to bear with me on that for a while. For the armor, I'm going to be using a new technique Vyasar told me, which is don't paint something pure black if you want it to appear black. It will be bluish black with various tones of blue dry brushed over it later to give it a kind of raised effect. Then I will be following that by painting the stockings, the breechclout, and the undergarments various shades of red. After I've painted down the reds in the typical dry brush fashion, I shall proceed to the metals, which I'm going to paint in a mixture of copper for the horns and possibly a little bit of the wristbands, and a lighter metal for the sword. After giving the whole thing its base coats, I'm going to add in some finer details with the dark silver. This will form the basis for everything else that I do metal on this model. Now, you may be thinking, what about that old Necron metal technique? Well, that's only for dull metal, and that kind of aesthetic doesn't really apply here, so we're going to have to do something a little bit different. It's time to actually dress the miniature. We're going to do this with contrast paints over what we have so far, and trying to not mess up the
ass.
And now that the awkward part is over, we can just finish up by dry brushing any other details we happen to come across. And then we can focus on a new way to do metal on the sword. Like I said before, this isn't the Necron technique. This is taking light metal and using that as the base, and then inking purple over it to give it an otherworldly, eldritch shine.
Well, now there's only one thing left to do. The eyes.
Oh, shit's getting real. We gotta tie up the little man bun. Oh,
Yeah,
no.
unlike this model, I'm choosing practicality over fashion.
Excuse me, sir. Hold on. We're gonna have a conversation about this later.
Here we go. Here we go.
What made you so uncomfortable to even paint this in the first place? I'm curious.
I mean, when I first started, I was 12, and I had not yet gone through puberty, so girl ass was awkward for me.
so
Having
it was
to paint girl ass was awkward to me.
okay. So it's just a lack of experience.
Yeah, it's a lack of experience and a lack of context, a lack of wondering why somebody would want to paint a model like this. That's just me, though. So what makes you so comfortable with it?
I mean, you said this is a dark elf, right?
Yeah.
So is this Warhammer than the medieval
Fantasy.
version?
Yeah, the medieval version.
Well, I'm curious, does the Dark Elf have an entire race? Is this normal? Is it normal for this particular unit to actually not have to wear as much armor as the other ones? Maybe there's a reason she's dressed this way.
Not all the Dark Elves go like this, especially not the male Dark Elves. It seems to be most of the female Dark Elves are dressed in some sort of revealing, BDSM gear, whether it be the sorceresses, who are actually, like, character-wise, they're pretty fascinating, but model-wise, it's basically just an upscaled version of this.
That could be normal for their culture. It's just a matter of context. And from what I was seeing, that the research that you did do, it didn't look like they gave a lot of background to the reasons behind some of their armor or their decisions. So maybe it was just a giant loophole because men were designing these things, or maybe they were leaving it open for interpretation. Who knows?
That's kind of where I've been going with this, is that it was a male-dominated hobby and a male-dominated company, especially in the 90s, like 94, 95, when this sort of stuff was coming out. The predominant group was boys, so I guess, like you said, it's a lot of guys would figure they'd rather stare at girl ass on the battlefield than man ass, but...
The only thing that I think most female culture in this modern age demands more of isn't that they be dressed better, it's that representation of the female be treated more fairly. Like, obviously, if it's going to be a human in the human armies, she's probably going to wear armor, versus... I don't know a whole lot about Dark Elves, okay? I don't know if this is normal. All I know is in a lot of the other games that I play, Dark Elves are super stealthy and they can get around stuff, and they don't want armor because your stealth goes through the floor when you clunk around all the time in heavy armor. So, like I said, it's probably just a decision made by a bunch of dudes and who didn't want to explain why they were just making half-naked models, but, I mean, if that's how all their women are, yeah, I'd be a little annoyed, but so far... If that's the only model set that you've got that does that, I'm not bothered by it.
And herein lies the worst part of doing any model, adding a pupil to the eyes. This, as usual, requires the finest of brushes, but if you manage to nail it just right, you'll end up with a model that looks pretty fantastic for what it is anyway.
So everyone, I'd like to thank Mickey for being my cultural consultant for this episode, and also for doing the camera work as usual. It's been a pleasure.
Yay!
And with the holidays right around the corner, there's going to be some special stuff coming up. A couple of commissions I've been asked to do. So we will be looking more at something pertaining to an old pagan holiday festival next time. Look for that video sometime around Christmas Eve, and I'll see you guys then. Until then, keep painting, stay cheeky breaky.